Hello, and welcome to Sustainable Outlook, a podcast from global law firm K&L Gates, where we discuss the transactions, technologies, and trends in the sustainable economy. We hope you enjoy this discussion. Please reach out with suggested topics or guests, or questions about how we can work together to create a sustainable economy.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Sustainable Outlook. I'm Elizabeth Crouse, a partner in the K&L Gates tax group and co-lead of our Global Power Group, which encompasses all things energy transition. I'm joined today by Adrienne Downey, who is the principal engineer and country manager for pure-play floating offshore wind developer and technology provider Hexicon in the United States and Canada. Prior to joining Hexicon, Adrienne most recently was the principal engineer for offshore wind for the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, aka NYSERDA, where she led NYSERDA's leading offshore wind program with the goal of reaching 9 gigawatts by 2035 and successfully procured in excess of 4.1 gigawatts. Very impressive. Adrienne holds a degree in chemical engineering from McGill University in Montreal and a master's in sustainable environmental systems from the Pratt Institute in New York. Thank you so much for joining us today, Adrienne.
Thanks so much for having me, Elizabeth. Really delighted to be here and looking forward to our discussion.
We're interviewing you as part of our series on offshore wind in the United States, but the offshore wind industry is huge. So to start us off, can you tell us a bit about where Hexicon fits in?
Sure. Yeah, glad to. So Hexicon is a pure play floating developer and technology innovator in the floating offshore wind space. We are headquartered in Stockholm, but actively developing projects in around 10 different markets globally. So from South Korea with our partners Shell, Scotland with CIP, Sweden with Aker Offshore, Iberia, Mediterranean, South Africa, and as of early this year, we're busy here in the US and Canada with my joining the group. So really, we're deep all the time, embracing the step change and complexity that is created by this next exciting chapter of offshore wind, which follows upon the successes of Fixed Bottom, and it was really a true honor to work with the New York team in helping to accelerate the emergence of that market. And now we're heading into deeper waters, adapting, what are really known and proven technologies that have been used for decades in the oil and gas industry, but pivoting their use to further accelerate renewable energy deployments globally. So as much as 85% of the world's coastline include water depths greater than 60 meters. Typically, that's the depth that invokes a deep water pivot. So really, to unlock the full potential of offshore wind, we need to embrace deep water globally. And indeed, DNV recently estimated that the global floating wind potential is likely to be as much as 260 gigawatts by 2050. So that's where we fit in.
Oh, that's great. And, obviously Hexicon is both a developer as well as a technology provider. It's made quite a splash with a very interesting dual turbine design. Does this technology make offshore wind more sustainable?
So, quite a splash. I really like what you did there. I do love maritime puns, I have to confess. But yes, Hexicon's proprietary design, the Twin Wind, is quite innovative and memorable. We call it Twin Wind because it co-locates two turbines on a single floater. And the genius of the design really is that the floater embraces its buoyancy and weather vanes around a single point turret mooring in order to keep the two rotors in plane to the incoming wind. Why is this important? Well, stated simply, you can increase installed capacity and yield per area of seabed. You can save environmental and economic impacts by reduced floaters, cables, moorings, which in deep water are quite expensive. And with the goal of expanding production and lowering LCOE of floating wind, which we all want to do, stat. But to your question of sustainability, I like to think a little bit about what Professor Michael Brungart, he was the co-author, you may recall, of a watershed book on the circular economy called Cradle to Cradle. And he was once quoted, paraphrasing here, of course, that if I asked you how your marriage was and you described it as sustainable, I'd be concerned. And he's right. It needs to be more than that. So I'm probably dating myself here, but I think once upon a time, sustainability was characterized by a triple bottom line, right? Economic, environmental, and social. So yes, absolutely. Overall, more yield, fewer floaters, fewer cables, fewer moorings, all of these, help to ensure that offshore wind is less environmentally and economically impactful and with more gains. But, so check on those criteria. But we are also committed to promoting strong social connections, right? Building strong relationships with maritime communities, with fisheries, with coastal and indigenous communities and tribal nations, with environmental justice and disadvantaged communities, and with labor. All of these stakeholders, matter a lot. And so in our projects to date, we've been very active in particular in, say, South Korea as well as in Ireland. We've worked really hard to engage sincerely with stakeholders, especially in the fishing community, to understand and to design wind farms and our approach with this economic and cultural part of our heritage as co-partners in service of a successful blue economy. So, sustainability matters, but it needs to be about maximizing benefits to all, not just about minimizing impacts. And so we're committed to really focusing on all three of those aspects.
Yeah, I think that's really important. It's something to lose sight of, particularly in the green economy, right? We're very focused typically on environment, but that's only one part of the pie. And, I think another question here, you talked a little bit about cost efficiency as well as sort of efficient use of the seabed, of course, and working with local communities. Part of working with local communities, I would think, would be maximizing the utilization of the space so that you have the smallest amount of impact on everything else that they do. And I noticed on your website that you all are working on something that's really cool, kind of a hybrid project out in Gran Canaria. It looks like it's going to be floating offshore, floating PV, and maybe some green hydrogen.
Yeah.
So does that make, hydrogen is sort of like the darling of the moment. Does the technology that you all have, this dual turbine design, does it make it easier to do that kind of project too?
Well, yes. So it's funny. It's a funny story. When Hexicon was first getting its sea legs, again, maritime puns, if you'll indulge me.
Maritime puns, yeah.
Exactly. So good. When they were first getting our sea legs, about 12, 13 years ago, its founders originally conceived of this like singing, dancing, floating concept that was, turbines co-located and with solar and hydrogen. And then, at that moment in time, they really had to say, okay, we need to dial it back in a little bit, hone our concept and refine our prospects. So it is with some degree of irony that we find ourselves back at this moment where we're embracing, multi-technologies. And in fact, the twin wind design has that as its, part of its original history and conception. But it's really a very cool opportunity to embrace, multidisciplinary and multi prongs of the green economy. I'm glad that you used that term because, as we look to, accelerate decarbonization, really, the simple term for it is electrify everything and decarbonize the grid, right? And that works for a lot of things, right? It works for considerable, housing and building stock, and transportation, but not for everything, right? So there's always inevitably this last mile challenge, and that's part of where the excitement of hydrogen is well timed, because there are some intractable areas of our economy that we do need to decarbonize. Particularly the maritime sector is going to be struggled. Aviation. There's long distance transit. There's lots of different areas that are really intractable, and so hydrogen does offer a very exciting opportunity. And between if you have a twin wind system, so our dual turbine structure with two 15 megawatt turbines, so a combined installed capacity of 30, you've got a deck space that spans almost 200 meters by 90 meters deep. That's a lot of deck space, right? You can put a lot of things on that. And so why not use that as an opportunity to embrace, additional incremental efficiencies and co-location of technologies. So I agree. It's a very cool project. I'm glad you asked.
Yeah, it is a really cool project. I'm really looking forward to some of the photos and videos and all sorts of fun things that are going to come out, I'm sure. You mentioned electrification. And I want to push a little bit on hydrogen because, of course, manufacturing green hydrogen or renewable hydrogen, whatever you want to call it, requires a lot of electricity when you use an electrolyzer and certain other technologies. So, if you need a lot of electricity to do this, why don't you just use one of those massive turbines that we have coming out of the market? Okay, sure, the twin wind design is very cool and takes up less space, but does it produce as much electricity?
So this is an age-old debate in the renewable energy industry, right? If one was betting in the early 2000s, we would have maxed out at 6 megawatt turbines, and here we are with a whopping 15 megawatt and 236 meter rotor diameters. I mean, that's a lot of generation potential. But before it's even run its full certification gauntlet, right? The industry is already clamoring for more, right? 21 megawatts, 25 megawatt machines. I mean, who doesn't love big shiny turbines? I mean, clearly, but there is tension here that we should be mindful of that may or may not be sustainable, right? There's tremendous pressure on turbine manufacturers who, in spite of unprecedented global demand, are struggling. I mean, how does that make sense? It's understandable, however, when you think about the huge investments in innovation that they're putting forward, and their products are barely, basically considered obsolete upon their conception in our effort to push down LCOE. And I agree. I mean, we need to push down LCOE, but we need to think about design, and we need to think about supply chains more holistically, right? And so with the twin wind technology, we can already get more per seabed of acreage using the 15s than single floaters, and would be even more so, with obviously if there's larger technologies that are ultimately embraced. So again, love big shiny turbines, not saying no, but it's just being mindful about the holistic gains. We can already deliver more than 45% more generation capacity per seabed acre. 45% is a lot. And I don't want to wait. We need to act on climate change. We need to boost our energy independence and security. We need to do what we need to do to foster good jobs and investments in our economies, post-COVID recovery. And we have the technology to do that now. So what we need to do is embrace innovations that expand the use of available technologies. We need to encourage supply chain spending earlier in project life cycles in order to ensure that infrastructure and workforce readiness happens, and that we need to embrace innovations across the entire project cycle, not just the turbines. It'll be to no one's benefit, I think, if we end up outstripping, our already strained port infrastructure, our already slim fleet of Jones Act compliant vessels, and especially here in the US, right? And these factors, will all curiously be contrary to our gain in that they'll increase LCOE. So, there's tension there. And I think, when we look to other sectors, the Airbus A380 or the Super Panamax vessels, these are cautionary examples of, we don't want to be creating industrial white elephants here. There's no need in offshore wind. We do have alternatives. We do have innovations, and we can get on with that at gigawatt scale.
And as you said, speed is a lot here.
Exactly. And so, to meet the hydrogen moment, which was part of the initial question, I think we have a lot of tools already in our toolbox to be able to deliver that. And you're absolutely right that the more hydrogen we are trying to deliver to the economy, that's just going to put even more demand and pressure on doing more with less in the renewable energy space and in offshore wind.
You mentioned that Hexicon's in several different markets already, and of course, you're new in the United States, right? So how does the United States factor into your plans? Why the United States? Why now?
Well, I mean, the U.S. is an incredibly exciting opportunity, if you will. It's sort of one of the holy grails in the offshore space, right? It's bigger, go big or go home, and it's really an exciting proving ground for large scale floating. And I think, it's been so exciting and so inspiring to see the all of government leadership that we have seen out of the Biden-Harris administration. When they initiated, the Jumpstart executive order in March of 2021, right? And then BOEM has just been absolutely incredible. Director Lefton, and the director, the Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland. I mean, they're just, the leadership is really, really pulling in a way that is truly unprecedented, and that's really exciting for the industry and brings a lot of confidence to investments that there is action. The comprehensive suite of leasing commitments that the administration has made is really unprecedented, right? I mean, to unlock what is it, six lease auctions in the next 4 years. I mean, that's wild. That's incredibly ambitious, and they're making good progress. Even just earlier today, I was listening to BOEM describing their draft proposed sales notice for California in anticipation of a September auction. And these are really exciting because they are deep water markets, right? If you look at the trajectory in the U.S., we've had the benefit of the cradle of shallow water on the outer continental shelf in the Northeast, right? And that has been where naturally, we've been able to get the industry underway. But after the Carolina Long Bays, everything else from here on out is at least a mixture of fixed and floating or floating outright, right? California, Oregon, parts of the Gulf of Mexico, provocatively as much as half of the central Atlantic, the Gulf of Maine. And then we all know, and I know well from my prior role at New York, that, New York is going to be coming back for more in some inevitable moment, right? Just given the outsized need that they have for renewable energy. So it's really just the opportunities are boundless, and the commitment from all of government at the federal level that is now, finally giving wind at the backs of what the states have been trying to do, and the state targets and leadership that truly has been exceptional. It's just an awesome opportunity. So it's really, a pleasure and an honor to be able to be part of this industry at this moment in time in helping to achieve these really ambitious and incredibly necessary goals.
Absolutely. I think one of the things I've been really impressed with from the federal government and state, for that matter, is unprecedented amounts of cooperation, right? You've mentioned several key leaders, several key agencies. They're really pulling together. It's not just one or two. It's great. And I think that's sort of a nice segue to the next question that I have for you is, when we were prepping for this call, you mentioned that you want the offshore and wind industry to be as welcoming as possible, right? That can mean a lot of different things. What do you mean?
Yeah, well, I think what I mean by it is that, this is a huge opportunity. It's a huge moment. We've spoken about, climate urgency, economic recovery, energy security. I mean, we can rise to really an existential moment, and that is exciting, but it's going to take a veritable army to build this industry, really, like thousands of people. The federal estimate from BOEM, in launching their leasing path forward, is nearly 80,000 jobs. And that is awesome, right? But you're not going to get 80,000 people, mobilized from a small subset of the workforce that is, sort of the wonky energy, wonky energy teams, right? Because I love a good energy wonk just as much as anyone, so I mean that affectionately. But I really mean that we need to be incredibly broad in our thinking, working collaboratively, as you say, with, those individuals that have, expertise in the maritime environment, working collaboratively with mariners, working collaboratively with fishing, working collaboratively, with different stakeholders, but it also means thinking hard about, diversity and inclusion, thinking about the role of women, being intentional about creating an open space, a welcoming space in order to bring, the magnitude of people and talents and diversity of disciplines that this industry is going to require, right? I mean, we need everything from, communications specialists and graphic designers through lawyers and, economists and, sure, we also need, naval architects and electrical engineers. But, we really need a lot of disciplines. And in order for us to hire, train and make successful, the workforce that we need, it really needs to be as broad as possible. And I think it's really interesting, when we think back to the role of labor that the federal government is eager to espouse, in this moment, it harkens back, to the early days of, what was the labor movement about? It was about creating pathways to the middle class for many groups. And that's just relevant today. When we think about restorative justice, when we think about bringing environmental justice communities and disadvantaged communities more fully into the mix, and helping, through their collaboration and participation and engagement, to be part of this industry, that's exactly what we need to do to unlock, 80,000 jobs. It needs to be inclusive. It needs to be welcoming. And so I really just want to put a plug out there that if anyone has any interest, in offshore wind and learning more about it, whether it's, a prospective fit for their career growth as an exciting opportunity, whether you come from the oil and gas sector or again from, areas outside of energy, I want you to feel welcome, and I want you to feel like you have an opportunity to play a role in this really exciting moment. So be eager to put myself on the spot and say, link with me on LinkedIn or wherever you connect, and I'd be happy to speak.
Aside from, applying to be on your team, which would be a fabulous team to be on, can you suggest any resources that there are for people who want to source more diverse workforce participants?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's lots of great resources. I mean, you've got organizations, just awesome organizations such as RISE, that's led by the impeccable Kristen Graff.
Right.
That's RISE with a WRISE, Women in Renewable Industries and Sustainable Energy. She's just awesome in helping to cultivate, a community of really forward-thinking leadership, as well as encouraging young people and great diversity in the fellowships that they cultivate. I mean, there's so many organizations. The National Society of Black Engineers. I just read this most inspiring post this morning of this incredible young woman, who just graduated from U Buffalo. Just like incredible, there's so much talent. We need to just, I think, expand our thinking beyond traditional recruitments, make sure that we're engaging with historical Black, colleges and universities, working with community organizations. If I think back here in New York, working closely with, the Sunset Park community and community-based organizations that have direct access into the communities, working with, with local EDCs, they're very well plugged in. And of course, labor, right? I mean, labor is also very well plugged into to local communities and is working to encourage, greater diversity and inclusion in what are really exceptional family paying jobs that they hope to be able to deliver through their trades. So, yeah, I think we just need to think a little bit more broadly than is perhaps the normal just post something on Indeed and hope for the best. Like that's really not going to help make the space welcoming. So I want to just make sure that's emphasized that indeed you are.
Indeed. Adrienne, thank you so much for joining us today on Sustainable Outlook. I've learned a ton, and I'm so excited for the grand new horizons that you and Hexicon have in your future.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. This has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate the opportunity to discuss and share a little bit about the Hexicon journey. So thanks very much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Sustainable Outlook. To listen to past episodes and receive notices for new episodes, subscribe by searching Hub Talks, that's HUB Talks, in your favorite podcast app. We hope you will tune in next time to learn more about the outlook of the burgeoning sustainable economy.